children come forward. Okay, you can stay standing because I'm going to give you a little illustration. It has nothing to do with the sermon this time. It's just something that somebody posted. I think it might have been someone here, but I thought it was an interesting illustration. So this is what I'm going to be showing the kids. Okay? Now, you stand over there, you stand over there. Now, what does that look like to you? What is that? It's a number. What number? 6. Okay. What number does it look like to you?
9.
Well, wait a minute. How can both of you be right? Is it a 6 or a 9? It's upside down. But it's not upside down to him. No. So it depends on your point of view, right? Okay. Okay. So as you go through life, you're going to be seeing a lot of things like this where people have different sides and different opinions as to what that is. Not necessarily this number, but different things in life. So it's important because God calls us to be, what? Peacemakers, right? So what we have to do is, even though we might think we're right and the other person's wrong, it's important to try to see things from another point of view, to be a peacemaker. Sound good? All right. Thank you. Every once in a while, something useful comes up on Facebook. So again, it is very good to be back. If you want to know anything that happened with us, you can always just come up and ask us. We did get tattoos. That's a whole other story, but so anyway. We're going to be continuing on with our finishing off the Old Testament, and what we're going to be talking about today is Jesus and the New Covenant. So again, most of the scripture is in your bulletin, and we talked last time about how there are common themes throughout the Bible, and the main one that ties it all together is the theme of redemption. So this narrative shows us a pattern of God's consistency, that no matter what else happens, God continues to move through history toward the end goal of redemption, which simply means He restored our broken relationship by reclaiming us from the power of sin. And there's a lot to cover, so we're not going to go over everything today. We're going to take our time to go through this last piece. But I want to show you how this plays out and how Jesus is the fulfillment of something that started from the very beginning, which is why I said that you can't understand the whole story without the Old Testament. So why did God need to redeem us in the first place? Well, when we were created, Adam and Eve actually walked with God in the garden. They had extremely close fellowship with Him. But when Adam and Eve sinned, they broke that relationship. So sin ended up being a separation. It ended up being a barrier between us. So from that time, God had a plan. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, it says, and this is God speaking to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush her head, and you will strike his heel. Now this is a very vague prophecy, but it refers to, we know now, the crucifixion, because even though Satan thought he dealt a blow to God's plan with the crucifixion, that was the bruising of the heel, Jesus had the victory and He crushed his head. So we talked about covenants and how each one moved us closer to redemption. Even we see from here, from this time, there's a grand plan for redemption. And all the covenants work together. One doesn't cancel the other one out. They build on each other. They work towards the same thing. And they're a continuation of the previous ones. But the final covenant that we'll talk about today is known as the New Covenant, and it's found in Jeremiah. Now here's what led up to this prophecy, that King Josiah had just taken over reign of Israel. And there was a major renewal of God's covenant with Israel. Israel had gone through a time of disobedience. Again, as we know, we did that quite often. But Josiah led the way to changing direction. It turned out that the book of the law was found in the temple when they were doing renovations. And it had been lost for some time. And all of Israel committed to following it again. But Jeremiah was called to be a prophet during this time, and although things looked better on the surface for Israel, he saw that their hearts had not been changed. Renewal of the old covenant was not enough. As we would, of course, see later when Israel was disobedient and was completely disbanded. Now, God needed to implement a new covenant because of that. And Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 34 says this: "A time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their forefathers. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor, or a man his brother, saying, 'Know the Lord,' because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their wickedness, and will remember their sins no more." Now this was the first time that there was a covenant that didn't begin at the time that it was declared. God didn't implement this right away, and there was no reaction from us, because this was going to be something that would happen in the future. God said a time is coming. And this was a prophecy that would give Israel hope for the future. This covenant would bring people into a totally different relationship with God. Everyone would have access to a one-on-one relationship with Him. The prophet Ezekiel elaborates on this, strengthening the idea that in order for Israel to truly follow God, they would need a change of heart. Ezekiel 36, 26 to 27 says, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you a heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws." And we can see the similarities between that and Jeremiah. The most extensive prophecies in the Old Testament that point to Jesus being the instrument of this new covenant are found in Isaiah, from chapters 40 to 55. And we're not going to cover all of it because it's so extensive, but we're just going to cover some highlights. But I would encourage you, if you've never read through those, to read through them yourself. I have the verses in the bulletin. You can't help but see how Jesus fulfilled these scriptures. So at times, Israel is mentioned as God's servants. But at other times in these verses, a single person is. And some of these that are contained in these are called the servant songs. And we're going to talk about this in the coming weeks, about the servant. So hang on to that there's Israel as a servant and also this other servant that it speaks of. But let's start with Isaiah 42:1 and also verse 6. It says, "Here's my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles." You see that he said, "I will make you, the servant, a covenant." Now fast forward just for a second, because here we see another clear link to Jesus. In Luke chapter 2, verse 32, Simeon praises God about Jesus when he's dedicated in the temple. He says also, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, just as it is in Isaiah, and for glory to the people of Israel. In Isaiah, God is saying that the servant will be the instrument of a covenant. Now, Isaiah was written before Jeremiah, but we have to assume that this covenant Isaiah is talking about is the one that Jeremiah is talking about. It's the same one. It's the new covenant that's coming. Something else to note is that the new covenant would be for Israel first, then to the Gentile nations. Redemption was always meant to be that way. And this was always God's plan, because Israel was never chosen by God simply for their own sake. They were always meant to be a living illustration of how people can have a relationship with God. In Isaiah 42:9, it says, "See, the former things have taken place, and new things do I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you." So again, God is saying in the midst of all these verses, He's up to something totally new. Isaiah 49, verse 6 and 8, reiterates the new covenant coming through one person. It says, "It is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. In the time of my favor I will answer you, and in the day of salvation I will help you. I will keep you and make you to be a covenant for the people." Again, he's talking about one singular person that's going to be this covenant, not just bring it about, but actually be it. So here's where it gets really focused. Isaiah begins to talk about God's servant in contrast to the disobedience of Israel. In Isaiah 50, verse 47, it says, "The sovereign Lord has given me an instructed tongue to know the word that sustains the weary. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pull my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting." This is all starting to sound familiar. This was written hundreds of years before Jesus. And Jesus endured those same things we just went over. It continues, "Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. He who vindicates me is near." Isaiah 55, verse 1 and 3 and 5 says, "Come, all who are thirsty, come to the waters. Give ear and come to me, hear me, that your soul may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander of the peoples. Surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations that do not know you will hasten to you." Even though David is mentioned, the covenant with David is not with these passages they're talking about. And you can tell because God says, "I will make an everlasting covenant with you," not "I have already made," it's future tense. And we're going to cover one more group of passages that ties all these together. And I'm going to give you time to turn to it, because it's kind of extensive. It's Isaiah chapter 52, verse 13, if you'd like to follow along. Isaiah 52, 13. And I know I'm giving you a lot to chew on today, but I hope you're seeing how all of this ties together. This is why I wanted to take my time, because there's so much here. And I don't want to rush through it in one sermon. This is all, and what I'm going to read, I'm such a geek when it comes to the Bible, because I love seeing how things tie together. I get all excited. But these things that were written hundreds of years before the time of Jesus, they are going to sound very familiar. So we're going to start with chapter 52, verse 13. And this is under the heading of the suffering and glory of the servant. Again, this is a servant that is to come yet. "See, my servant will act wisely. He will be raised and lifted up and highly exalted. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So will he sprinkle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. For what they were not told they will see, and what they have not heard they will understand. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before them like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as sheep before her shears is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death. Though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him, and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper his hand. After the suffering of the soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. Sounds a little like Jesus, doesn't it? And like I said, it's amazing that these things were written hundreds of years before Jesus was even physically born. But to sum all this up, the redemption of the human race from sin is intertwined and furthered with each covenant that God made with both people and nations, as we have gone over these last couple of weeks. And it all comes to completion with this new covenant. This covenant is described in Jeremiah as like no other. People will come to know God personally. His law will be on their hearts, his spirit will be within them, and he will bring about the forgiveness of sins. Isaiah proclaims that this new covenant will come about through one person, the righteous servant of God, whom we know as Jesus. So now next week we will move into the New Testament, and we'll talk more about how all this is brought to fruition and how Jesus and Israel are tied together. Would you pray with me, please? Lord God, we thank you for this time, and thank you for the instruction that you give us. We thank you that so much of history is intertwined, and how a book that was written by so many different authors across different nations, different times, just ties all together and fits so perfectly and points to how we have been redeemed to you. And we thank you for that. We thank you that we have a relationship like no other. And we pray that you continue to reveal yourself to us and draw us to you. In Jesus' name.